another episode of Shining the Light On. How are you, Therese?
I'm doing pretty good. It's definitely, we were talking before we went live that there's a lot of turbulent just energy coming in. Maybe it's high level energy, but it is definitely affecting people's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I was awake at like 4 last night.
Me too.
So sleeping on and off.
Yeah. Sleep is definitely on and off here too. And I'm ready for a good nap.
I think that's not going to make an interesting podcast, but I would totally
I know.
join you.
Right, let's just nap. Everybody just take a nap. We all need a nap. So today, based on we had the conversation last week around the scare event, which was a really interesting conversation. And what we're going to dive into today is what phase 2 is, because apparently there's 5 phases to this plan, this ascension, this awakening, right? New earth. And we're currently still in phase 1, and phase 1 is taking a lot longer than we all suspected, because I vividly remember back in January of 2021, the Blossom Good Child channeling, where they're like, this is the week, like, this is it, your wait is over. And now here we are in October of 2023, and we're still in phase 1. So holy crap, what a timeline shift happened there.
So just to be clear, because some people might not know what phase 2, phase 1 means, where's that information coming from?
So I've gathered most of the information from Blossom Good Child's channeling, and then there's a couple channels on Instagram, like the 5D Awakening, and like I can't exactly remember the like specific names, where they talk about like just kind of these different layers or levels energetically, emotionally, that we have to go through to help awake the collective consciousness to get to like mass consciousness and get to this place where we can go to the next phase. And now we can't even fathom the depth of this plan. Like we can't even fathom it. So of course, I'm not surprised that it's taking longer maybe than expected. But there's so much going on that we don't understand or know, and probably don't want to know. And that's totally okay. But essentially, the way that I've heard it, so it's like theoretically, right? Like I'm no expert with this, but what I get is that in order to go from phase 1 to phase 2, we have to be at critical mass, that certain things have to be cleaned up underground, right? Like that has to be taken care of. I feel like, and we have to hit the precipice. And some of us are not there yet. Right. And that's why we talked about the scare event last week, because that is one of the things, that is what's going to take us into phase 2 from what we got from our reading and asking questions and things. So yeah, I think like phase 1 is this whole awakening, massive cleanup, right? People's pineal glands coming back online. And it seems like what phase 2 is going to be is cleaning up minions, finishing up cleanup, doing arrests, further arrests, who knows what's actually going on behind the scenes. And perhaps we get some disclosure in phase 2, because we're going to be at home.
Yeah. And I feel like we've been getting disclosure the whole time. I mean, we definitely
but I mean like mass disclosure, like it's literally being broadcast on every phone, every TV, because here's the thing, we're getting it, but there's tons of people with their head in the sand that refuse to look at it or think it's a conspiracy theory. So I mean, like, it's in everyone's face and nobody can avoid it.
Right. And this is why we need critical mass first, because it doesn't matter if you're telling someone the truth if they can't look at it, right? All they would do is, if they were in denial of anything happening, let's say they're just fully tuned into the matrix, right? They're just going to justify what they're seeing to fit their worldview. They're not going to necessarily shift their worldview unless you are in the situation we're in right now, which is the discovery phase. It's like, here it is, it's right in front of your face. You know what I mean? Like, you don't think our borders are being infiltrated? Well, now Joe Biden is saying, oh, we need border protection because it's overwhelmingly being infiltrated, right? Like, this is what people have to see, and they have to go from that point of thinking that taking those kind of precautions are excessive or maybe rude, right, or impolite or unloving, to understanding why you would need that kind of protection. And so you can't just tell them, because it was told to people many times.
And they thought it was racist.
Right. Well, it's racist, or it's inhumane, or, it's, if we're such an open and free country, why can't anyone come in freely? And then, even if you explain to them, well, look, imagine instead of a country, this is your house, right? And wouldn't you want to know who's coming into your house? Or would you just be like, hey, the back door is open, come on in anytime you want, right? Nobody would be okay with that. But even trying to explain it at that level wasn't enough, because then you get bias and prejudice in the way, and you're being inundated with information about why you should hold your stance rather than why you should look at it differently. And so we're at the point where it's the show me phase, right? Show me what's happening. And so now, as we go through that, what happens is, again, different events wake up different people for different reasons. So some people were awakened really early with COVID or lockdowns or mandates or things like that, where others were seeing it as like, no, this is a sensible measure you take to protect yourself, right? They were not compatible. And so you go deeper and deeper in until it hits them where they're like, that's enough, right? For some people, it was the implication that you had to do it. For other people, it was, well, there's a little thumbs up on my screen. For other people, it was the slippery slope of, once you force one thing, then you're allowing the force of another thing. And for others still, it won't really affect them till it affects their money, right? Like, they won't be affected until you start taking away their money or threatening their money, then they wake up. And then for others, even still, it's like, until someone's in my face threatening my life, then I won't believe it. And so it's really weird, because for you and I, we were done quite early. Like, as soon as before this started, I was done. I was like, I'm not playing this game. And unfortunately, we all had to play the game. But for others still, it's not really affecting them, right? They're like, I don't want to look at it. This is stressful. Life is back to normal. I want to see things a certain way. And they would rather just avoid it, right? I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to give it energy.
Right.
And even that perspective is dangerous, because if you're going to turn your back on what's going on and not at least assess your situation, then you're opening yourself up to danger.
Totally. And a bigger shock when it does drop, right? Like,
right. Because I mean, if you think about it, if you're a human, and let's make this a totally different scenario. If you're a human and there's a bear, and this bear is hungry and angry, and you've got food, and you're like, well, I'm just going to ignore this bear, and I'm not going to act like it's there, and it'll just ignore me. That's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily the tactic that the bear's going to take, right? In that scenario. So, this is a tough phase, I think, mostly for some of us, because of the waiting. We're like, I get it. Can we move forward? Where it's like, but in order for this to be as successful as it can be, in order for more people to be safe, we actually need to wait and allow them to get on board. And again, that's, I think, the part that really tests people, because again, like, we're all tired, and it's not just physically tired, we're emotionally and psychologically tired.
Exactly. It's all of the above, and the world just keeps feeling more polarized, and going out in public just feels so, I'm just like, I can't, it's so draining in most places, because there's like the 3D, 5D split, and there's no judgment, but it's like, holy crap, I don't want to go to a lot of places, because it just feels so dense and heavy, and it just feels like different worlds, right? And I mean, that's part of what we have to go through. It's part of what we volunteered to go through, but some days it just doesn't make it easier.
It's
just want to take
difficult.
A big nap.
I remember listening to Corey Good talking to James Gillian like a few years ago. And he was talking about in his version, he was talking about the waves of ascension. And I can't remember what he quoted us as further along at that point, and that was like 2021 maybe when he was saying that.
Okay.
But I remember he had talked many times about end time madness before we got here. He had talked about it on the show Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia that I used to watch back in like 2017.
Yes.
And I remember hearing him talk about that end time madness, which I think is probably even like biblically referenced to. I have not read the Bible, but I do believe there is some correlation maybe with something there.
For sure.
But that shit's real. Like it is real. And you think like, you'd think to yourself, it can't get weirder than it is now, and it keeps getting weirder. And as an example is this, I was telling Amber before we got on that there's people out there now saying that drinking pumpkin spice lattes is racist. It's, if you drink that, you're a racist because one, food historians are saying, do you know what happened to indigenous people to get the spice of nutmeg? And it's like, you shouldn't drink that without acknowledging the struggles of the people where the nutmeg came from. And it's like, what? Like literally what? You know, like you're supposed to stop and consider every herb that's going into your body. It's just, it's literally, you can feel nitpicking. It's nitpicking. What it shows me is here's a person who's so unhappy and cannot stand the idea of anybody being happy or enjoying their life. And so they're literally, it's like picking little grains of rice out of sand, trying to find something they can latch onto to create a new form of suffering or victimhood state, right?
Yeah.
Or shame you more for just being alive.
Exactly. So it's just it just honestly feels like a big mess right now. So
I mean, it's so one of the things now I remember hearing about phase 2 from Blossom. I don't remember the conversation, although I do think I heard it. So I knew it came from her, but I do recall like them talking about the fact that it gets so, you're supposed to be at this point. So and to give you a little bit of light, the fact that you're exasperated and overwhelmed by it is a sign that it's on track. Like you shouldn't be going into phase 2 feeling like you're like smooth sailing and like, this is great. It should feel the way that we're feeling. So I would say the good news is that we're definitely in the right headspace, feeling space for this to occur. If things felt fine, then that probably wouldn't be occurring or wouldn't be time yet.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree with you. So why don't we, unless you have anything else you want to share, like cut to the chase and like start asking some questions and tapping into the energy and some guidance from the universe around this phase 2.
Well, I guess my question for you, and this is just, for opinion, but like, what do you think is going to happen when we do get in phase 2? Like, do you think you're going to feel better, worse, or the same?
I think there's going to be relief. And then I think there's going to be a lot of emotion. Because from the sounds of things, if it's going to go the way that it seems, it's going to be really intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's going to also be a relief because like, finally, like, yes, it's going to be intense, but finally this part is happening. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I feel like I'm going to be like. Yeah. Oh my gosh, finally, like, oh my gosh, this is so intense. Like, oh, right. But finally.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about it because, I do think that one, I would kind of like to opt out. And what I mean by that is I would love it if there was some sort of like split for people who are moving to a higher timeline to not have to experience it. But what's really interesting is even David Wilcock, he was out a week or so ago talking about it. And he was like, we have moved through many timelines for this ascension, even to the point where at one point, and I remember Dolores Cannon's material was saying it, there was going to be all these earth shifts, and Nostradamus had prophesized this as all this earth shifts. And so people were bracing for cataclysmic type of events. And it looks like we've actually moved past that timeline. That's not the one that we're on. And then it was, okay, well, then it's going to be this big solar flash energy And that's going to be the big shifting event. And according to what David was getting, and maybe this is the question I want to ask actually, is he was saying we've even moved past that timeline. And instead, now what we're going to see is the full phase 2, as you're talking about. We're going to see the military tribunals, the lockdowns, the arrests, like we're all going to see that. And I'm like, interesting. I would kind of like the one where we get to like blip, like, snap your fingers, sizzle, or whatever it's going to happen. And this big shift happens where some of us don't have to go through that. But that's wishful thinking on my part. I don't have any control about how this goes. I just know I signed up for it. And as far as like phase 2, my hope is that enough of us are in the same boat where we're actually not fighting against the action. So for example, if there were a military, what's the word I'm looking for?
Martial law.
Thank you. If there was a martial law, the ideal place for that to happen is where people are actually asking for that intervention, where they understand what it is and they want it because they understand it's a cleanup and it's there to protect them, not to enslave them. A scary scenario is if you go into that and not enough people understand its function, and then you have chaos, right? So it's tricky to wish that, because in wishing that, it's like, well, then I really want, that 95% of people awake and aware and in tune with what needs to happen, rather than the 20% fighting back.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I put it in the question so you can ask.
Okay.
So my first question is, when they talk about in the channelings and Blossom's channelings, that when we come out of phase 2, the world will look unrecognizable. What does that mean?
Okay.
I have an inkling, right, that it's certain things getting shut down, right, that we're involved in not good things for humanity, but what does it mean?
Okay. Ooh. Taking their sweet time today. Oh, here we go. This one. All right, so I think that the first thing they want you to know with this card, so we got the 3 of Wands in the reverse position, and this isn't, I think that the astronomical growth that you're hoping will happen isn't quite there yet. So they're not showing me like, boom, it's really different, because again, you got to ease people into this. So I want more to that, because they're like, it's not going to be that big shift that, like to a utopia, because we have to build something like that. So
I know it'll take time.
Can you expand on what the world being unrecognizable? Oh, interesting. So then the Judgment card comes up. Now, this is the card that would represent the ascension point, right? So there is an ascension point that happens here. And this is the card that represents, traditionally it's got Gabriel, the Archangel Gabriel, blowing the trumpet of truth, and it pulls people up from the dead. So you usually see like, what it really means is pulling people out of a dark cycle of time. So pulling people out of a dark age and into the age of light, where this has to do with knowledge was hidden that's now revealed. And so there is a disclosure that definitely happens. And in a type of mass awakening, this card definitely has that awakening energy and moving into the truth. So if I feel like what they're saying is kind of for the people who are already looking at it, might not feel as big. So that might be this is like, I don't feel any different. The world though, now imagine if every single person, for the most part, in the world is talking about the things that we're talking about right now, where it's acknowledged as the truth. It's no longer a conspiracy or fantasy, right? Now it's like, this is the acknowledged truth. There was a control structure over us. it had a plan to eradicate a large portion of the Earth's population, to take over so that it could control it, right? To enslave, to do all those things. And we were already in it. We were already in it, and they were kind of closing the cage walls in a little tighter is what they were doing. Right now, only some people can acknowledge that. And for other people, it's like, they kind of get it, but it feels too extreme still. It's like, that's how could so many people in places of power be in on it, until you realize that there is a small percentage that's been running this, and that they've had that power for a long time. So for what us feels normal and like, these are everyday people, I guarantee you most of them are not. And the ones that are a part of it that are not are controlled. They're bought and controlled.
Totally.
And so it's a big thing to wrap your head around, that you've been living in this kind of lie.
Yeah.
And then to come to terms with that, there's this sense of unsafety that usually occurs first. Like, I'm so scared, I'm really unsafe. And then it usually dawns on you after a bit, wait a minute, this is how I've lived my entire life. So I'm no more unsafe than I was before I knew. It just, the difference is now I know.
Yeah.
Right. And so that does happen for sure.
Good.
But for us, it might feel like a dud. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it might feel a little bit to people like you and I who talk about this or engage with it, like, that's it. And yet it's a huge action when everybody's on the same page,
which is exciting. And I can't wait to reassure people and just be there for people. I think that, like, even if it feels like that's it for us, like, I'm just excited to be of service and help people along, because I feel like that's one of the reasons why it's not just going to be like, snap your fingers and we're into the new earth, because part of the reason why we came here was to hold space and assist those across the bridge. Right. And we'll know more as we get closer. Ooh, and it's 444. So
I love that.
But I feel this deep desire to be part of this communal collective assistance to help people along. Right. And why do you think we've chosen the kinds of businesses we have? Well, because we've gotten to practice a lot, and we're practicing a lot now. And I think that's going to really help assist us, with that as well. And obviously continuing with our businesses and whatever else will unfold as we go into this phase too. But I'm just personally very excited to be like, oh my goodness, you look distraught. Like, can I help you at all? Like, do you have any questions? If anything, can I just look you in the eye and tell you everything's going to be okay? You know what I mean? Like, that just gives me chills and feels so resonant. So that's okay but to me, it's a relief still, because it's like, at least we're here, and now at least the majority of humanity knows. And now, you know what I mean?
Well, now the real work can begin.
Yes, I mean, exactly.
See, it's kind of like we've been watching a movie, but you have a part in the movie. I have a part in this movie. Every single one of us on this planet has a part to play. Some people's parts are going on right now.
Yes.
But there's other parts that activate. And if there are, let's say, 5 phases or something like that, you don't know when your time is, but you will be called to serve at that time, and you will know it. It'll just be like, I have to do this. Right.
Exactly. So that's helpful. That sounds good. So
my team says it's like, okay, what's happened for us is we got a free movie screening pass to a movie that's about to come out, and we've already seen it. So it's the difference between seeing it and then it being released to the general public, and them like being like, well, and us going I remember that part.
Totally. We knew that 3 years ago. Right. So a question that's coming in though, because they always say like, what you're going to learn is going to shock even you to the core. And I'm like, I don't know what would honestly shock me at all anymore. Like, I just don't know. Could we ask like what the shock factor would be?
I feel like yes, we can ask. And at the same time, what I'm getting is it would be highly individual still. Like, it would be like, I mean, would it shock you to find out that this really is a simulation and you're plugged in somewhere? Would you be shocked?
Not anymore.
For me, that would still be shocking. It would still like blow my mind, even though I'm kind of like, I kind of suspected that. You know what I mean? Like,
maybe if I had more sleep, I'd be like, yeah, maybe I'm a shocker. And I'm like, I just, whatever it is, like. But I get it. The
Yeah.
individualized thing totally makes sense. And different parts of disclosure are going to shock different people.
Yeah.
So,
I
makes
mean,
sense.
because I learn things every day that are like mildly shocking. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like
same,
when we're
yeah.
like, I didn't know, and maybe we should talk about this one. I had no idea that fluoride was a byproduct of toxic runoff.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that's what it was. I thought fluoride was a mineral, like found in the ground.
Right.
And apparently the fluoride that they're using is toxic runoff that they cannot dispose of. And so they're using us to dispose of toxic chemicals. That's what I've heard. We need to verify that, obviously.
For
like,
sure,
don't
but
get
it
all.
wouldn't surprise me.
But just hearing that, I'm like, is there no low
I know there's
to
no
their
low
evil?
to
Is
their
there no
evil.
bottom to this,
No.
evil?
No.
So yeah, I mean, I can imagine that there's going to be things that shock the crap out of people on a more individual level, but let's ask and see, is there anything else you can give us a heads up about? All right, team, is there anything that you can point to that would shock pretty much every single person about what's going on or what we learn? Okay, so we got the Five of Swords in the reverse position, and the Five of Swords is crappy either way. This literally represents the cruelty of this group.
Which even to hear it again, like to hear it come out in disclosure is, I know I'm gonna bawl, I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna be so upset, because
one of the things I'm getting from it right now is, oh God, I remember hearing this the other day. And again, I need to run it through my system. So I'm just sharing the information. I'm not confirming anything, but that there's actually more land than they're telling us there is, and that we're really more confined on this planet than we might realize. And that means that there's land where there are crops growing that are probably really healthy and very advantageous to humans. There's land where the water is pure and healthier for us. Like there's enough space for everyone. Like there's enough space. So I think one of the things that we're going to find out is just how squeezed we were. And because it's like the elephant that grew up with the, the rope around the little peg, that's what you grew up with. You don't even realize. You just kind of accept what you're given. You don't realize how you have been squeezed, right? And I think like to the level that we've been squeezed as humans is going to be revealed. And I think that's going to be quite shocking because everything that's happening is artificial. There's artificial, it's artificially created poorness in our world. There shouldn't be anyone who is at that level, and yet they're creating it artificially. Meaning they actually have to put in effort and try to reduce the quality of life for people. That's very artificial. And it's not just from an energetic standpoint. I mean, literally like resources wise, abundance wise, it's like, think about the diamonds, right? Those are artificially made to seem like they're sparse and in lack to raise their value, but they're actually quite common.
Totally.
And everywhere, and if we played in that reality, they would have no value. They would just be, they'd be cool, but they would cost the same as quartz because they're abundant. Right. And so this is part of what it looks like in their artificial world of lack that they've put us in. And the irony is that we all kind of just rolled over and we're like, okay, I guess that's the world, when really the world is a very different place.
Totally. I agree. You couldn't have said it better. So I'm going to just pick one more question just to be mindful of time, and then we can maybe do a part 2 next week. Because there's still lots to ask, but I'm going to ask the question of, will phase 2 be the timeline of martial law, military tribunals, arrests, like we know there's disclosure, but is this stuff also going to happen during that time?
Okay. So I'm going to ask my pendulum. demon, spirit, guides, angels, ascended masters, higher self, and source energy from the highest truth will phase 2 be the period of martial law and disclosure to all people using phones, televisions, computers, etc. Will this all be happening in phase 2? Yeah, already. Yes. So without a doubt, that's what we're heading towards. And I do think that that creates that the judgment card we saw where it was like full awakening now. Now it can go.
Yeah.
Because everybody is caught up, they're on the same page and they're seeing it, and they were conditioned and ready to see it by the phase that we're in now, right? Which is that this phase is definitely not fun. The second phase is not fun for different reasons. But I think that after going through what we've already gone through, it's a better phase than phase 1.
Yeah, it'll be a relief for us.
Yeah.
That's just what keeps coming up is relief. And like, finally, like I swear, I'm just gonna be like, finally, finally, like. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you are aware of all the injustice, what the hard part, the things that we don't get to see because they're happening behind the scenes are things like, for example, the Rothschilds having to sell off their entire estate, literally selling like pieces that are collector's items that, have value and would go down through a family and only increase in value. They're suddenly selling all of this off. And it's like, well, if you don't understand why they're doing that, you just think, they have so much, they just have to get rid of it. And it's like, no, they're being forced to do that because they're already gone. They're already in captivity. They're already being dealt with. And this is part of the little sliver that the public gets to see. And only if you understand why they're being taken away, would you even question it, right?
Exactly.
So it is happening. It really is.
Yeah.
It's just, again, that it's so hard when you're like, I'm tired of not only being oppressed, but being highly aware that this is happening and it doesn't have to.
Exactly. That it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
That's the key. Right. I cannot wait. I cannot wait until garbage bags don't exist that smell like Downy, because it's next to impossible to find ones that don't smell like it. I just can't wait until everything on this planet isn't poisoning us.
Right. And I mean, how about where all countries get rid of, the fact that
everywhere
in my country, we allow 300 plus chemicals in our food that other countries will not allow, that they have to make a healthier version for another country. Yeah.
It's going to be great.
So, at this point though, it's about the judgment card. The other meaning of that is personal responsibility. So up until it can get taken care of on a mass level, it is about your personal choices. And so obviously, we don't engage with those things because it's not good for you.
No, but it just will be nice when it's not a thing anymore.
It will be nice when we've got companies at the forefront who are, for example, I just heard, there's a restaurant chain that has committed to stop using seed oils. And I can't remember which one it is, but they're not going to cook any of their foods in seed oils. And so they're actually getting, on the page where it's like, I'm acknowledging that this is bad for humans, and rather than putting profit first, I'm putting health first.
Good.
Right. And I think we will continue to see more people individually fight back and create the means and the causes. Like, for example, another example is like Daily Wire is doing a version of Snow White that's not woke. Right. And they're releasing that at the same time as the woke version that's coming out. So what's really interesting about this time is we're not helpless. We actually have the power to innovate. And it's people like you who are going to be part of that process to bring something healthier forward, whether it's through teaching and awareness like you're doing now, or if you're a company or someone who has the means to create the counter solution to what's being offered.
Exactly. No, there's a lot of it happening and a lot more to come. So it's very exciting. We all just need a good nap
But it's tiring too. I mean, it's
tiring.
okay. It's okay to be exasperated and tired by it. This is called the fatigue of war, right? This is a real thing. And, you know, the fact that you're feeling it can confirm we're really in a war. It's not the kind of war that we're used to reading about, but it is a real war nonetheless.
Exactly. So we'll have to check in on part 2 of phase 2 next week, because there's still questions we didn't get through. But where can everyone find you if they want to learn more about you and your work, Therese?
Yeah, so you can visit me at blythestarlight.com and see all the things that I'm offering right now. I'm getting ready to do the Epic Year Workshop 2024, which is all about creating goals that are actually aligned to your personal vibration, so that you're creating something that's going to feel like it's in flow with the way that your life is naturally heading. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to blythestarlight.com/epic-year. I will put it in the description below so you can easily click on that. And of course, follow me on YouTube at Blythe Starlight. And Amber, how about you? How can we work with you?
Well, if you need help getting grounded or healing self-sabotage with food, like emotional eating, because the world is stressing you out, you can click the links below to check out a body freedom consultation, take the free emotional eating quiz, as well as find other resources to assist you along the way, because you will feel so much better off feeling more grounded and feeling through things rather than self-sabotaging. I'd be a mess if I was me 14 years ago. Right now, I'd be binge eating all the time. So let's get you some support so that you can work through it and just feel a little bit better while the world shifts. So thank you again for joining us today, everybody. If you have any topics you want us to talk about, you can leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you next week for part 2 of phase 2, the conversation around what may happen when we get into the next, phase of this process. So thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Bye.